Hey, so I've got a little disappointing news today. We were scheduled to have Tim Hodges on the show to speak about the Rotary. Tim had a scheduling conflict. We're looking to reschedule tomorrow with Alan Gray. Alan is also a Rotarian. I met Alan about 2 years ago. He's also a member of Toastmasters, so I'm assured it will be an engaging conversation tomorrow. So we will have a special broadcast or podcast tomorrow at 7:30. But today, I want to talk about a couple things in Yonkers. I want to talk about we've seen an increase in people panhandling. And before we get that, I just want to touch on a little bit of news. Being that this is a different type of broadcast with no guest, had to prepare a little differently. So I'm going to be trying to share some screens here, like being on Zoom at work, and hopefully this all works. So let's try this. Share a screen. All right. So we're going to talk a few news items first. Let's see. We got that up. There we go. So Westchester Assembly members are urging Governor Hochul to sign the Hudson bill and stop Holtec Hudson River toxic dump. So this is very important. As you know, the nuclear power plant has been shut down and it's been being decommissioned. Holtec is the company that's doing the decommissioning. And I just want to highlight our assembly members here um, who are sending this letter because this is very important. They're operating on our behalf. Gary Pretlow, is there a way of making this a little bigger? Not sure there is, but let's see. Gary Pretlow, Annie Paulin, Steve Otis, Nader Sage, Chris Burdick, and Mary Jane Shimsky. I thank you all. This is the Hudson River is such a treasure for us here in Yonkers. Yonkers Paddle and the Paddle and Rowing Club the is right on the river and provides a lot of programs. The BZAC Environmental Center is there, and it's just a great place. You can cool down, you get a breeze off of the river. I used to go fishing with my father back when we would go there. That was the lighthouse, I believe. And yes, we fished there back when it was fully with PCBs. I'm not a fish eater, but my father would eat the fish. Yes, it is a treasure, and I thank these assembly members. Um, also, I'd like to share a little news here. Let's see. So I know we spoke last week about Chuck Lesnick being interested in the seat to replace Chris Johnson on the Westchester board, but that is being filled. Simmer Brandon was the first Black woman to serve on the Yonkers City Council, so she knows the area well. I believe this is a good decision. It's a caretaker, much like the Yonkers interim superintendent. This is a caretaker position. You don't want a firebrand in there who's going to try to create legislation. You want somebody in there who's going to echo the voices of her constituents until that seat can be filled. I do believe that after the election, we still have a three-way race. We have Chris Johnson, who will be on the Working Families Party. He can ask for his name to be removed, but I think it's too late, and he'll still appear on the ballot. You have Debbie Kozak is the Republican candidate. She's been out there every day campaigning, and we would be lucky to have her. And we'd also be lucky to have Shanae Williams, who also has been out there campaigning. So we look forward to that race, but I believe there could be a special appointment uh, after the November election. So we're lucky to also have Simmer Brandon, and we look forward to her continued service for Yonkers. Uh, let's see if I can share. guess I can't switch between multiple screens with this, but I'm going to share the next and last news item, which is about the ALS uh, Ice Bucket Challenge. So again, we have the Ice Bucket Challenge. I have not yet participated in this. Um, it's a good fundraiser. It's the 10th anniversary. Unfortunately, Mr. Quinn is no longer with us. He instituted this. It's a good cause. You can see the majority or plurality of our elected officials joined, from Anthony Moranti to Mayor Spano. I believe this is Nader Sage over here. The majority leader is somewhere in the pack. I believe our council president was joining us via wheelchair. So it was a good event, and hopefully raise some awareness and some money. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I hope to be a little better prepared for our next one. This was a little bit of a curveball, and not having a guest today. Uh, I'd like to talk about the increase in panhandling within the east side of the city. We've seen some folks within ShopRite. We've seen some folks on Central Park Avenue with large OPTAG signs displayed requesting money. And I'm going to urge you not to give, and I'll explain why. These are generally related to gangs. I've seen some things on social media complaining about it. It's great to have a big heart and give money to people who need it, but these are professional panhandlers who are either being trafficked by folks or are being are part of a professional ring who go out to panhandle. And if we contribute to them, we're continuing to contribute to this behavior. And some of you may ask how or why I know this. And in an earlier life, I owned a bar in Yonkers, and we would get a group of who I thought were just our normal, everyday Irish immigrants that would come in. But they weren't. They were what people would call knockers or tinkers, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. That's how I learned to refer to this group. And they would generally come around and do driveway paving and other work within Yonkers. And I got to be very friendly with them. And we had a customer in there from Ireland who was a contractor uh, who knew of these groups growing up and kind of filled us in a little bit. And unfortunately, the folks who came in with what they called the Godfather was they were pretty much enslaved people. They were young men who came over here. They were in their late teens, although they may have been underage coming into the bar, but they were in their late teens, early 20s. Uh, and they'd be promised a certain amount of money to come over here and work. Once they arrived here, their passports were taken. They were placed in in somebody's basement apartment. There'd be 4 or 5 young men in a basement, and they were working for $80 a day. They got food and they got drink. And unfortunately, they had no options to work anywhere else. Their passports were taken. They couldn't escape. They were kept drunk and I guess happy. But there's also a tragic tale to this, and I want to share that with you. Um, so this is Death of a Dream. It's from the Irish Echo. And I'll pull it up so I can kind of read a little bit to you. But this was a young man who was working in the paving trade. Although not in Yonkers, he did wind up in the Woodlawn section of the Bronx at the end of his life. So it must have seemed like a golden opportunity, a chance to live abroad, earn enough cash to live well, and send a little something back home. Instead, say friends, Liam Mason's American dream turned into a desperate, exploitive nightmare. After 14-hour days with little money he had expected, the last weekend the young man, I'm sorry, after months of 14-hour days with little of the money he had expected, last weekend the young man from County Monaghan could face no more. Almost penniless, he made his way to Kennedy Airport in a desperate attempt to get home. The following Monday afternoon, June 15th, Mason, who was 23, was found hanged from a tree by a belt inside a small clearing in the footpath of Van Cortlandt Park in the Woodlawn section of the Bronx. His Irish passport was still in his pocket, the date on his 3-month visa waiver card set to expire just a day after he ended his life. Mason's death has officially been ruled a suicide, and investigators found no signs of struggle or criminal action, said the Bronx detective involved in the case. It seems that he was promised a pot of gold over here, and it didn't work out for him. In the end, all he did was talk about going home. He had nothing here, the detective said. With the help of the local New Jersey police chief and the Irish consulate, Catholic Charities, Mason's body was removed to the funeral home and eventually flown back to Castelblani, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, where his family lives. So I'm just sharing this with you to show that we still have enslaved people here. This is very similar to I've seen some of these people setting up in the mornings, and they'll get dropped off at their locations, stand on the side, the van will pull away, and then they'll have these OCTAB cards out. They'll set up at Fort Hill Road and Central Park Avenue and start begging for money. So I urge you not to do this, because in essence we're supporting human trafficking. And I'm not saying that, in this story with the contractor here as well, I'm not saying that every Irish contractor is engaged in human trafficking or every landscaper is engaged in that. That's not true. There are some folks out here that are making a real wage. But we have to be careful when we start vetting contractors that we're not contributing to this movement. And certainly if somebody's begging for money, I don't think that we ought to give them anything, but we should try to get them help. If the police come and investigate, they can figure out whether or not we're talking about a trafficking ring or not. So I've got a William Ward on, who is asking me if I'm an Arizona Cardinals fan. No, actually, this is a Greenwich Cardinals shirt. In a prior life, I worked for the Greenwich Public School System, and that is their motto. So anyway, so I wanted to convey that. I want to talk a little bit about the news in Yonkers, which I believe we have. So it's going to be a shortened show today. I don't have a lot to offer you other than letting you know that we do have bands of migrant folks here, and that's not the migrants who came in over the border. That's not the migrants who are at the hotels. These are a different band of migrants who are part of an organized group here to panhandle, which I believe there are some ordinances against that within our Yonkers City Code. If you guys have any questions you want to put up or you want to talk about anything, I see we have a couple people on the broadcast podcast. You're welcome to add the comments. If not, we'll end it. As you noticed, we do have a rebranding. So as I spoke earlier, we're calling this The Bridge. And the idea is that we're going to try to bridge the Yonkers communities. Although I grew up in Southwest Yonkers, I kind of grew up in a little bit of a bubble because I associated with folks who looked like me, generally, folks in my own socioeconomic strata. I went to Catholic school my entire life, except for graduate school, but undergrad, I went to a Catholic school. So, you tend to deal with the same people and work with the same people and not have a lot of chance to reach out. So that I'm looking to do that in the broadcast. As I said, tomorrow we'll speak with Alan Gray about the Rotary. We'll also try to invite some folks on from the Yonkers arts community, see what they're doing in future broadcasts. And of course, we will talk to some political candidates. But again, the idea of this broadcast is not to knock anybody down. It's to build people up. So I hope you can join me with that. If you have suggestions for future broadcasts, we can also discuss that. So we've got our friend LT DiMaggio. Ron, how do you think Anthony Moranti should approach trying to appeal to voters on the West Side? Well, I think Anthony should engage in some surrogates. it's important. It's important that we talk to some people on the West Side. They're feeling disenfranchised about losing their opportunity in this whole term limits debate. So I think Anthony does have some opportunities to reach out there. Once you get to know Anthony, you realize he's not your typical CPA. He actually does have a personality. Um, I think people would appreciate meeting him, and he'll get some folks engaged in his campaign. We've got William Ward. Please encourage all Yonkers residents to come out and vote in November. William is very true on that. I think the last couple of elections, we've had no more than 14% of the voters out. When I ran 2 years ago, less than 20,000 people voted citywide. I believe we had 140,000 voters, registered voters in Yonkers, and we certainly could have done better in getting people engaged. And I put that on the politicians. I put that on me for not being engaged, not reaching out enough to get people engaged. And so you have to be passionate about your platform, and you have to make people believe in your platform to come out and vote. It's important. People have given their lives to make sure that we remain a democracy. So, all right, if there's nothing further here tonight, I'm going to let you get back on with your dinner, or your Netflix or whatever else is on the agenda. So tune in tomorrow at 7:30. I'm going to bring you Alan Gray from the Rotary, and I'm sure Alan's got a lot to tell us. Thank you very much. Good night.